In 2020, Animal Crossing New Horizons provided people with a home away from home as we all needed something to occupy our time and thoughts with during the COVID-19 lockdown. For several, this was yet another welcome installment in the franchise, but for many people such as myself, this was their first introduction to the series. Animal Crossing is very captivating on many fronts, such as its charming yet simple character designs and sandbox-like gameplay, but what enchanted me the most was its music. By the way, hello everyone, my name is Arkhand, the resident purple magician and musician. If you're a veteran to the channel, you know exactly what I do, but if you're new, I make background music for myself and other content creators. I just want to shed some insight on the whole process. Enjoy. The Animal Crossing series has a unique composition style in that it is very minimalistic. Compared to other video game background music tracks, it will seem that there is not actually too much happening for the majority of Animal Crossing's tracks, and this is done very intentionally. Animal Crossing has tracks that loop consistently until the hour changes in real time. As such, the game does not want to wear you down with the same melody over and over again using a 90-second loop like you'd find in most other games, but rather, it wants to invite you to stay and play a little bit longer with a less involved but still catchy and familiar soundtrack. In 2022, I decided to go on a musical training arc to learn and practice this composition style to apply it to background music for myself, my friends, and for other streamers to use. I'd call this venture a big personal success, and I find it's currently the most popular request I get when composing background music. In this video, I want to share some of this process with you and hopefully shed some light on what makes Animal Crossing so comforting with minimal but intentional sound arrangement. Animal Crossing's composition style changes across its different titles, but I'm going to separate them into three categories: the 2000s era, New Leaf, and New Horizons. Animal Crossing's earlier titles featured what I find to be the jolliest of the tracks. The instrumentation and sound design was somewhat limited by the technology of the time, but this does give it quite a lot of charm. Here are snippets of my two favorite tracks. 5 p.m. is very stylistic for GameCube era, right? New Leaf is where things become a lot more somber, but still maintains the same composition style. There's a sense of pensive nostalgia in these tracks, which has an almost wistful feeling to them, but it still maintains its charm. Pay attention to how both have a groove going, but the melody is sparse throughout. This is where Animal Crossing makes use of space in its composition. Keep this in mind across all tracks you hear today. You can hear a lot of the space and repetition in both these tracks. The melody is present in 5 p.m., but it's not overbearing. And in 4 a.m., there's not much of a melody at all. Instead, we have this recurring pattern of 3 notes in the mallet percussion and piano trading places, accompanied by almost haunting guitar notes. New Horizons leans into the guitar much heavier than the previous titles. Some would argue it sounds completely different than the previous title's tracks. However, if you listen to some of these tracks, you can hear it keeps that quintessential Rhodes piano in it, even in its more whimsical tracks, such as this one. 2 a.m. has a regular piano in it as well, which harkens back to some of the more somber tones in New Leaf. Now that we have a snippet from each game, there are 4 key things about Animal Crossing's composition that we need to keep in mind when composing in a style that's inspired by all of it. First, as said before, space. This is something I personally pride myself on, as during 2 separate remix contests hosted by Pretty Patterns, Diego has said, "Arkhand knows how to shut the f***." And honestly, I largely attribute my ability to do this to my practice and experience producing in this Animal Crossing style. Space is arguably the most important part of composing music similar to these hourly themes, as you do not want to overstimulate your audience. The purpose of background music is, well, to be in the background. They're meant to be relaxing and inviting. The melodies and background music is spread throughout the entire track, and there is usually only one or two leitmotifs per track. What this also does is that it gives the impression that these tracks are longer than they truly are, and it allows you to reuse melodies and leitmotifs across several tracks as well. None of these tracks are overly busy, and I mean that in more ways than one. Secondly, we have the instrumentation of each track. Most Animal Crossing tracks feature percussion, bass, chords, usually on Rhodes piano or accordion, and one or two melodic instruments. If there is more than one melodic instrument, it usually plays some type of call and response, such as in New Leaf's 4 AM, which we heard in piano and mallet percussion. This is what I find to be a sweet spot in more minimalistic composing. It's just enough to entice you, but it avoids being overbearing. Third, we have specifics, such as tempo and length of each track. Animal Crossing tracks in general range from about 70 to 110 BPM, usually not going too far above 100. This is still quite a wide range and gives you a lot to work with. Most Animal Crossing tracks are about 1 to 2 minutes in length, which is pretty typical of most BGM. Again, it's the space and composition that makes these 1 to 2 minutes seem longer than they are without getting tiring. And last but not least, we have what I'll call the illusion of ambience. Between space and composition, along with aforementioned leitmotifs, we are able to create music that is charming and thematic, while also still being atmospheric or even ambient. It's this sweet spot that makes Animal Crossing's music so good as background music, which is why it's so often used in almost every single streamer or clipper's BGM, and why it's often requested as BGM. I did want to touch upon the concept of leitmotifs before moving on to some track review. When I composed Arkhand Crossing in 2022, I did what the Animal Crossing composers did as well. Take a central theme and spread its short melody lines, about 2 or 3 of them, across 25 different tracks. Each track sounds entirely different from each other, yet reuses the same composing materials. This is also how I was able to develop a central theme when producing background tracks for Raura Pantera, and most recently, as of 2025, Nimmy Nightmare. If you listened closely to all of Nimmy's BGMs, the same 2 melodies used in Non-Stop Nimmy Nightmare are also present in most of her background tracks. Both creators own the rights to their music, but I do advise you check out their streams here. I'll include links to their BGM playlists on my own page below. What we can definitely do is look at the tracks that I have written by myself for myself. Let's start by taking a look at the composition of Leaf Umbrella from Frog Songs. I use 2 pianos and rain ambience. That's it. The melody on the higher piano occurs not all at once, but around the chord changes between the tonic and the flat 7th. Now a quick but relevant tangent. The Mixolydian mode, while not used too much in Animal Crossing itself, gives tracks a sense of adventure and inquisitiveness. This is given by the flat 7th as opposed to the natural 7th, which is pining to resolve up to the tonic. You can hear this sense of pining in this part of I Think I Remember. Personally, I do not like melancholy music too much, so in most of the tracks I made as part of the learning process, I did not include the natural 7th. However, if you are specifically trying to emulate certain tracks from New Leaf or New Horizons, I do encourage you to become familiar with it. Something I do like is being goofy though. That's why 9:18 PM is my favorite track from the Arkhand Crossing album. You can hear the instrumentation from the GameCube games in the bass and the accordion. The marimba was a personal choice. I'm a big fan of Grant Kirkhope's composition in his Nintendo 64 games such as Banjo-Kazooie. One thing I think I did not fully capture in this track was that it was a bit too structured, and I think it could use some more space between melodic phrases. If you want an example of even more structure that wanders further away from the Animal Crossing style, this is 10:45 a.m. from the same album. Can you guess where I got the inspiration from instead? Yeah, it's a pretty stark deviation. The melody is all together and there's almost no space at all. The ambient effect is just not quite there. A good way to think of how to incorporate melody into these tracks is to treat it like a special treat. Make the listener miss it and want it just a little bit. If you serve it to them on a silver platter constantly, they'll start taking it for granted. I still like this track as a BGM, but this could be an example of what not to do in terms of adhering to the style we're going for. Something more on track is 5:13 p.m. The Animal Crossing Bossa Nova tracks are closer to standard Bossa Nova BGMs in that they achieve the style without being too fast or just too much. And what's an Animal Crossing soundtrack without Bossa Nova? "7:02 a.m. is way closer to what we're going for overall. The leitmotif from the album on the marimba is sparse, and there's plenty of space between phrases. The track also repeats itself with an accordion in the background to add a little bit of a difference while increasing its length. I feel like I achieved the same thing in 9:32 a.m. as well. Again, the melodic line only happens every 4 to 8 bars or so. And that space is especially important in this track when the melodic instrument is a recorder. I'm not trying to give the listener a headache here, I'm just trying to be a little silly. And you know what's not silly? Letting me know if you like this kind of content from me. I'm going pretty far out of my comfort zone for this, though I think it's worth it because I really do enjoy sharing knowledge and experience like this. Thanks for listening so far. Let's look over one more track. This is 4:27 a.m. It is a completely different motif from the rest of the Arkhand Crossing album, and that is because it is an Animal Crossing-ified version of my original Starting Soon BGM I used to use on my Twitch streams. Because I like New Leaf's 4 a.m. so much, I wanted to emulate it in my own style. I feel like I have achieved that emulation here. The instrumentation with the piano, the tempo, the ambience, the nebulous melody and repetition throughout. If you'd like to know more about the challenge I took on in 2022, it was this. I used a random number generator to generate a time, which would be the name and the theme of each track. I then gave myself around 2 hours live on stream to compose the track, or at least produce most of it. I repeated this until I went through all 24 hours in a day, and we wound up with 25 tracks, including the intro. This process was over the course of several months, and while yes, it did make for some pretty fun content, it was a learning experience that I have come to treat as invaluable. I do want to acknowledge that despite these examples and experience, I really do not think I have mastered this style, nor have I recreated it perfectly. I would prefer to say that my tracks are inspired by Animal Crossing style, rather than trying to closely imitate it. While learning from someone else's style is a fantastic way to learn, only you can create in your own style. Only you can make your own art. We are an amalgamation of what we experience and what we learn. And because of that, I am so happy that Animal Crossing has been that experience to me. It has given me something to do during the early parts of the 2020 lockdown, while also helping introduce me to what I hope to be lifelong friends. It's only natural that it would have such an influence on the music I've had the privilege and pleasure of making for myself and others over the last 5 years. Thanks so much for listening, and hopefully Nintendo will make another banger Animal Crossing game on the Switch too. Either way, as always, stay tuned.